what we ultimately call it does not matter. What matters is that we all get on code. That's what matters. You understand what I'm saying? What matters is that everybody pay attention to what's going on in front of them. We all share information. We communicate. We figure out ways to help each other and fight effectively together and to show solidarity. But whether we call it gangster fascism, ultra MAGA, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a damn what you call it. Call it whatever you want. But we need to fight it. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers, sisters, comrades, friends, people. I don't like people who rarely like me. It's Pinhead Politics. I'm your host, DJ Pinhead. We're watching a video from a guy named Charles Angus. I don't know why I said it like that. Charles Angus. He works for Meidas Touch, an amazing progressive network out there doing great journalism, great work, great interviews. This is the Canada version and extension of it. He's talking about gangster fascism. I know that they mentioned him bringing up gangster fascism, or him potentially being the first person to bring it up. I want to point out that Dr. Cornel West is the first one to really continuously coin and point out that Donald Trump is a gangster fascist. He is a gangster in every sense of the word. What you gotta do is check out some interviews to see it for yourself. Other than that, yeah, it's supposed to be a good video. I mean, I did watch the entire video, and I'm not gonna lie, he brings up a lot of good points, a lot of stuff that we're gonna touch on later in the video. So without further ado, let's just get into it and see what's what.
Okay, let's talk about what Donald Trump has set out to do by invading Venezuela and kidnapping President Maduro and his wife. This has nothing to do with democracy. Trump has made it clear that the Democratic opposition he considers weak. He's not even going to consider letting them take control in their own country. It's about the oil, he said. This has nothing to do with drugs, obviously, even though drugs and drug threats were the original reason for him shooting people off boats and then seizing the oil tankers, because he just recently pardoned the ex-head of Honduras, Hernandez, who is charged and convicted of flooding the United States with cocaine. So what was the point? The point was to send a message. To send a message to Canada and to the rest of the world that what the United States is and has become is a gangster klepto state that will do what they want to do and shake down whoever they want to shake down. Gangster fascism.
Facts.
You know what he said at this press conference he gave was that American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. This was sending a message. And it's a clear message to Canada. He said, "We will secure our borders. We will stop the terrorists. We will defend our citizens against all threats, foreign and domestic. This operation should serve as a warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty." Well, clearly Venezuela wasn't threatening America.
What's crazy about that is that they're threatening Greenland's sovereignty. You know, like the idea that they're saying all this because they don't want China or Russia to potentially threaten or be too close to American assets and NATO and all the things that I guess America feels like it has to protect on the Western Hemisphere. This is hilarious coming from them when they're the ones trying to usurp an entire country.
American sovereignty. Venezuela was doing its own thing when Donald Trump, again, launched attacks on the fishing boats and set up the illegal blockade and seized the ships. Donald Trump is telling...
Now, assuming that everybody knows what he's talking about, there were some fishing boats that were out in the, I believe, the Atlantic Ocean, and without any confirmation of who they were, and what they were transporting or what they were doing out on the sea, the Trump administration, Pete Hegseth, and the military began to bomb and blow up these ships. There was a huge, oh God, what was it? It was an article that came out, and it was all over the media, where they double tapped a fishing boat, where they struck a boat. There were two survivors left. They saw them there, and then they hit them again, and killed them, which was essentially a war crime.
Telling us that the oil that he is interested in getting control of is somehow part of the sovereignty of America. What he said was this was the Don Roe doctrine, an update on the 19th century Manifest Destiny Monroe doctrine, but it has nothing to do with the 19th century Manifest Destiny. This is classic gangster shakedowns. Donald Trump is a gangster. We have to be really clear about that. It's something that
Donald Trump probably grew up around gangsters. He definitely rented to Russian mobsters in his apartments in New York City. We'll get into that a little bit later. And without a doubt, I think he idolizes mobsters and gangsters.
American media has tiptoed around and ignored time and time again. Donald Trump exists today because of the massive amount of dark Russian mob money that was laundered through his operations. It created this image of him as this wealthy tycoon. He has benefited from mafia money. He has benefited from criminal ties. That's who Donald Trump is.
And if you're from New York, you pretty much know this.
Donald Trump is a convicted sexual predator. We know this, and yet he was allowed to become president of the United States of America. So
we already know about Trump's business connections to Russia that go back decades. When talking to a magazine in 2013 about a meeting he had in Moscow with potential investors, Donald Trump said to Real Estate Weekly, quote, "I have a great relationship with many Russians, and almost all of the oligarchs were in the room." In 2008, Donald Trump Jr. spoke at a real estate conference and said, quote, "Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets." USA Today has done a review which reveals that not only have Trump and his companies done significant business with Russia over the years, but that they've been tied to at least 10 former Soviet businessmen with alleged links to organized crime and money laundering. These are what we would colloquially call mobsters. 3 owners of Trump brand condos in Florida and New York were federally indicted for illegal gambling and money laundering activities associated with the Russian mafia. A Ukrainian who owned 2 Trump condos in Florida was indicted in a money laundering scheme involving a former prime minister of Ukraine. A member of the firm that developed Trump's condos in Soho, New York, is a Russian immigrant who's a 2-time convicted felon for stabbing a man and for a $40 million stock manipulation and money laundering scheme. It's weird because I thought Trump was against violent immigrants, but at the same time, he has violent immigrants as business partners.
That's everything about that man is a hypocrite. Officially, Russiagate didn't find any direct evidence of Vladimir Putin trying to steal the election for Donald Trump. However, there's no reason to think that Donald Trump wasn't greatly influenced by Russians, isn't greatly influenced by the Russians, that they didn't bankroll his initial presidency for their own benefit, i.e. we're talking about the national security of Greenland. Something that would be a linchpin for Vladimir Putin getting it out the way, pulling it out the way so that he can begin to try to break down and defeat NATO. Something he's always wanted.
A lot of people have been wondering over the last couple of years why the president frequently seems so deferential to Vladimir Putin or friendly.
Russian interference in our elections. I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
It's such a weird thing to say about another person. Extremely strong and powerful. It's like, I don't think I've ever said that about a person before.
Buying a luxury condominium with cash isn't illegal, and buying it in the name of a corporation or an LLC is not illegal on its own. What would make it illegal is if you're doing that with criminal proceeds. So if you're a Russian oligarch and you've got all this money from your corrupt operations over there. You want to park your money someplace safe where people won't ask questions about it. There was a study that found that there were more than 80 purchases from people either in Russia or other former Soviet states who were paying cash for condos or other units in Trump-owned properties, Trump Organization properties, valued at more than $100 million. Classic money laundering is literally cleaning up your money. Breaking Bad is an example of that.
This is the nail salon, right? I take your dirty money and I slip it into the salon's nice, clean cash flow.
You're trying to conceal the nature or origin or source of criminal proceeds so that if they're discovered, they'll look legitimate.
Final step, integration. The revenues from the salon go to the owner. That's you. Your filthy drug money has been transformed into nice, clean, taxable income brought to you by a savvy investment in a thriving business.
There are currently at least 3 different bodies investigating the president's financial dealings and any possible allegations of money laundering or financial ties to Russia. We've got the Mueller investigation. Mueller's investigation is primarily looking at possible Russian interference.
This is just evidence of Trump being the criminal that he is. This video is, I believe, from 2016, 2017, something like that.
With the election and whether any members of the Trump campaign were involved. And then you have prosecutors in the Southern District of New York, and they're doing a whole series of separate investigations, possibly looking at money laundering involving the inaugural committee. Their focus is on were there crimes committed in our district. Then you've got Congress, Congressman Schiff's committee, that wants to investigate these financial allegations and possible money laundering because they're concerned whether the president might be compromised, whether Russia has some source of influence over him based on financial ties or information they have about money laundering.
We need to know, for example, whether the Russians have financial leverage over the President of the United States that's warping U.S. policy in a pro-Russia direction.
So the possible allegations are that President Trump, when he was a businessman before he became president, may have had these ties with Russians who were engaged in money laundering. As a businessman, that's one thing. And we'd be concerned about that because of the possible criminal violations and the laundering taking place. Now, as president, you get into a whole other area of concern, which is, does that give people in Russia any leverage over the president? Either because he still has financial ties there, or because they know things about the Trump Organization's involvement in possible money laundering that they could threaten to expose. And I think that's the primary concern of the House of Representatives and why they want to explore these allegations of potential money laundering, even if they took place before Trump was president.
So amazing, very direct, informative piece there that when I was looking up what was going on with Trump and his actual ties to Russia and what Russiagate looked like, there was a bunch of articles and videos that I watched and saw that after reading it all and after doing my own research and kind of being able to judge for myself, it does look like he's hella compromised. And every decision that he has made that regards Russia and Ukraine, this issue with Greenland, to find out that they have this big deal with Russia that they're trying to do to work out for some oil, like all these things tying into each other is making me think the plan all along was to use Trump as some bullshit Manchurian candidate to devalue the American dollar, minimize our influence, and ultimately kick us off of the top of the world stage. And it's insane because MAGA is literally blind to it. It's insane to me to watch. I gotta tell you. Anyways, back to Charles Angus spitting that hot fire.
Should we be surprised that MAGA, with its constant grift and constant threat and constant shakedown, is basically a criminal state run by a criminal? So that's the first part of what we talk about in criminal fascism. Ben Masilas from Meidas Touch said that one of the reasons he started to work with me was that I was the first person publicly to identify the nature of modern MAGA as a gangster fascist state. I don't know if I was the first, but it was really important from the beginning of my work to try and make people understand what we were dealing with wasn't just a new manifestation of crazy Republican politics and right-wing chest beating that it was.
What we ultimately call it does not matter. What matters is that we all get on code. That's what matters. You understand what I'm saying? What matters is that everybody pay attention to what's going on in front of them. We all share information. We communicate. We figure out ways to help each other and fight effectively together and to show solidarity. But whether we call it gangster fascism, ultra MAGA, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a damn what you call it. Call it whatever you want. But we need to fight it.
Something different. It was the gangster element, the kleptocracy, but also the rising level of authoritarianism, undermining the rule of law, threatening judges, going after independent media, pieces together. Once you put the gangster fascist pieces together, you now know the level of threat that's on our border. And long before Donald Trump even knew where Venezuela was, he was setting a narrative of threat against Canada. So Donald Trump talks about securing the borders and stopping the terrorists and going after the drug kings. Well, the first thing he said about Canada was that we were somehow this fentanyl center killing thousands of Americans. He described fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. Well, you know the coded language of weapons of mass destruction, giving a U.S. regime the ability to go in and invade in another country. And Prime Minister Trudeau tried and tried again to reassure the Americans, to use facts, to show that our border was not flooding the Americans with fentanyl, but it didn't matter. It was about establishing a narrative. Kash Patel of the FBI then ramped it up. He started to talk about needing to protect the American border from the Canadian terrorist threat. He talked about hundreds of terrorists coming across the border. It was ridiculous. We know that. But did you hear
Everybody knows that. And remember, he famously got booed at the USA versus Canada hockey game that I think we might have lost to. But he's completely alienating us from Canada. It's terrible to watch.
New York Times and the Washington Post and the CNN and the blah blahs on the evening talk show saying, what the heck is he talking about, this threat from Canada? Donald Trump was establishing a narrative.
You're going to flood our
of threat.
Syrup, yo.
And then that threat was elevated again by Kristi Noem, who started to talk about the threat of the northern border. That's us. Bringing criminal gangs, El Salvadorian gangs across the border to terrorize poor American citizens. We knew that was ridiculous. But again, the narrative of threat. And now Donald Trump is telling the world that he can go wherever he wants. He can take whatever he feels he wants to take from any country under the pretext of threat. A threat that in Venezuela did not exist. A threat that in Canada does not exist. This is the nature of gangster fascism.
I mean, if he can do that, why can't Russia continuously try to take the Ukraine? I mean, when you hear Trump talk about the parts of Ukraine that's been lost, he's completely fine with Russia keeping what they've already conquered and taken. And what's to stop Trump? I put it to you like this: Trump will probably pay lip service to defending Taiwan, but Taiwan's probably going to get absorbed by China. That's more than likely going to happen. I don't see it happening any other way. And when it does happen, don't expect Trump to do shit.
Fascism. But I talked about the crack that's
perhaps his racism and hatred for China will make him want to go to war with China because, you know, Trump doesn't like anything that's not white. You know what I mean? If it ain't white, it ain't right. But other than that,
beginning to appear. And I want to go into that a bit more because the crack is appearing in the bombast, the arrogance, and the hubris that we saw in that press conference. Because Donald Trump, as a gangster, only understands shakedown. He doesn't believe that America wins by negotiations. It's only by threat. And what he's abandoned is
Trump is a hustling ass dude from Queens.
America's long history of using their immense diplomatic power to get what they want. What do I mean by that? Well, Canada would have bent over backwards in the past to avoid an open confrontation with the United States. So the language would have been coded. It would have been diplomatic. We would have done a dance. And then in the end, we would compromise. Donald Trump has taken that ability to compromise away from us because he's ridiculed us. He's undermined us. He's laughed at us. He thought he could slap us around. But what did that accomplish, Donald? You see this incredible resistance and determination now from the Canadian people. They hate your guts. And Canadians will never, ever, ever allow you to take anything from us. We would never give up our freedom under any circumstances.
He talking about Trump wanting to make them a 54th state. I mean, the 51st state. I mean, the ideas that come out of this man's mouth is hilarious.
Circumstances. Donald Trump, you have made us aware of the necessity to resist. And by his ridiculing of the notion that he went into Venezuela to restore democracy, because obviously Donald Trump doesn't care about democracy, he's pulled out from the Western allies any ability to paper over the problems, to pretend that there's a way we can talk about this. He's made it clear this is just a shakedown. And following the attack in Venezuela,
keep in mind what he's saying. He's saying Donald Trump's rhetoric is very clear about what he wants to do. He wants to make Canada a 51st state. He wants to take Greenland. I mean, today they had a meeting between Greenland and Denmark and the United States. I believe Marco Rubio was there. J.D. Vance was there. And Greenland effectively just stormed out. America's making it very clear about what it is they want and they want to do. And these people are not jacking it.
Venezuela, Stephen Miller's wife posted a picture of Greenland with the American flag all over it and said, soon. So he was sending a message to Europe. Guess what? I'm coming for you next. I'm coming for a NATO ally. He's forcing the Europeans as well. They would have bent themselves into pretzels to avoid a confrontation with the United States. Well, now they have no choice. You either stand up or you roll over. That is what the world of gangster politics is all about. What I'm betting on is that this hubris and this arrogance
So we see there Trudeau reportedly says Trump's talk of making Canada I can't even read it with a straight face. Justin Trudeau reportedly says Trump's talk of making Canada a U.S. state is a real thing. Of course it's a real thing. He's a fucking sociopath. Article by Jim Morris in AP News. Let's see. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Friday said President Donald Trump's talk of making Canada the 51st U.S. state is a real thing. It is linked to the country's rich natural resources, local media reported. Everything is about this dude's greedy, fat ego wanting to take people's resources. Like, what? Why are we still doing colonialism in 2025? Trudeau's comments to businesses and labor leaders in the closed-door session were mistakenly carried by a loudspeaker, Canada's public broadcasting CBC reported. Mr. Trump has it in mind that the easiest way to do it is absorbing our country, and it's a real thing. And in my conversation with him Trudeau said of making Canada a unison state. Mr. Trump has it in his mind that the easiest way to do it is by absorbing our country, and it is a real thing. In my conversation with him on Canada making United States, Canada becoming the 51st state. They are very aware of our resources, of what we have, and they very much want to be able to benefit from those, Trudeau says. So we just want to take the shit. Trudeau's office did not immediately respond to requests for comment. I mean, what else is there to say? Trump has made it very crystal clear what it is that he wants. I swear, man, we live on the evil timeline. That's where we live, on the evil freaking
This arrogance is the beginning of the end. I'm not saying it's coming soon, but America is weaker than it's ever been. It has no allies. It's alienated Africa, which is going much more to the Russians and the Chinese. He's completely angered and alienated Latin America and thinks he can push them around. They are going to be standing up. He's sending a message to China. Well, if we can shake down countries, well, so can you. So, well, there goes our ally in Taiwan. He's sending a message to Putin. Do what you want. But what he's telling the rest of the world is either we stand together at this time or we're going to be broken. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is the moment where it's no longer possible for those sitting on the sidelines, for those in the middle of the road, for those hemming and hawing and hoping for the best, to realize this is anything but a gangster fascist threat. And it's up to us as Canadians to resist. And I know we will. You know, Canada has a long history of defending the international rule of law. Now we're dealing with...
I mean, he couldn't be more right. And it's not just up to Canada. I think we all need to remember that there needs to be an enormous amount of solidarity. When we get the opportunities to collaborate and work and come together as a collective, as a community, for broader and better ideals for our country and our families, we're going to need to take that at every opportunity. I agree with everything he has to say there.
With a regime that openly murders people on the sea and invades countries and kidnaps their leaders, all bets are off. But we know what the mission is and we know what we have to do. And I want to close on this. I want to quote Winston Churchill in 1941 in the darkest moments of the Second World War, and what he said about Canada. He said, Canada is the linchpin. I'm really struck by that. Canada is the linchpin of the English-speaking world. Canada, whose relations of friendly, affectionate intimacy with the United States on the one hand, and her unswerving fidelity to the Commonwealth on the other, is the link which joins together the great branches of the human family, a link which, spanning the oceans, brings the continents into their true relation and will prevent in future generations any growth of division between the proud and the happy nations of Europe and the great countries which have come into existence in the New World. And here we are, as that threat is here to break us apart. Canada remains the linchpin. We remain the front lines. We remain the voice of resistance. This isn't going to be easy, my friends, but I want to assure you, if we keep doing what we're doing, and I urge Prime Minister Carney to start moving on this volunteer force of civilians, we need to build that up. We need to continue to build our alliances. We know now that the Europeans understand that they're going to work with Canada because we are that linchpin that's holding it together, and we will not break. Not now, not ever. Because we are true, nor strong and free, and we'll always be true, nor strong and free. So thank you so much. Folks, January 16th in Edmonton, we've got some details.
Man, one time for that dude, Charles Angus. Appreciate you, bro. That was an amazing video. That was great information and extremely informative, and I appreciate that dude, and I hope he continues to do the great work that they're doing over there at Meidas Touch. One time for Charles Angus, one time for Meidas Touch. But he's not wrong. I think for the free world as we know it, you know, before the era of Trump, yeah, I think Canada is a huge linchpin. I think they're going to be crucial in any part of what will happen if we end up having to go to war, or this thing escalates into something in America that we probably don't want it to be. I mean, I know tons of friends who are talking about potentially moving to Canada. You know, it's insane. So I wanted to just go over that video because this is one of those, to me, that was a very it was a different perspective and understanding. What we're trying to do is elevate more progressive voices over here. We're trying to get different perspectives, and not just perspectives of people here in America, so that we can have a more broader understanding of what it is that we are looking at, and hopefully wake some people up, because they'll realize, holy crap, we're not there. Like, everybody else thinks that we're crazy. And it's like, yeah, every other country is looking at us. If they don't have a dictator, they're looking at us like we're nuts. And we need to make sure that we are pointing the light, shining the light on those journalists and people who are willing to come out and try to help us get our country back. Hella important. Hella important. Yeah, man. Peace and love. May the Lord bless your bones, as the old folks used to say. And we out, baby. Span politics.
From the shop to the cloth, that's on my head top. Trying to stay close to my people like I'm the red body. Think that I'm